بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome back everyone to our reading of this great book of Islam, the Risala of Imam al-Qushayri. Picking up where we left off, for those who have the book, it's page 87. Unification and separation, al-jama' wal-farq. This is a very important concept. We alluded to it a couple classes ago. And it's also a concept that is typically mistranslated because of the word jama or unification. I mean, it's here translated unification. So one would assume, if you read that somehow you become one with God. And even we say that in English, I'm going to be one with God. Obviously, that we can't do that. That's a metaphysical impossibility and a theological heresy for us. So we have this explanation, we'll talk about it, and then we'll come back to the words. So unification and separation, al-jam' al-farq. Khala radiyallahu anhu wa nafa'na bi'ulumihi fi ad-daraini ameen. So Imam al-Qushayri, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and the next. The expressions unification and separation are often mentioned in their Sufi discourses. Our master Abu Ali ad-Daqqaq used to say, separation is something that is attributed to you. Unification, on the other hand, is something that is taken from you. So when you are left to yourself and you're inside yourself, you feel separate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the separation. Me, you, this, that, here, there, we're in ourselves. So we see that there is separation. And then he says, but unification is something that is taken from you. So those distinctions are taken from you. So you don't see that there's a distinction. You see that everything is one creation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He meant that whatever the servant of God acquires by means of fulfilling the requirements of his servitude and by means of his status as a human being is separation. As for unification, it is everything that comes from the real, such as the bringing forth of new entities and the bestowal of grace and favor upon humans. These are the minimal requirements for the states of unity and separation because they continue to take notice of their deeds. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows a person to continue to take notice of his acts of obedience and disobedience, this person finds himself in a state of separation. Right? So you're focused on, I'm praying, I'm fasting, I'm doing this, I'm doing my dhikr. You're focused on you, so things are separate. When on the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows a person to see his deeds, this person acquires the attribute of unification. Thus, the assertion of the created world belongs to separation, whereas the assertion of the real is an attribute of unification. So if the person who is engaged in devotional works and they are moving from separation to unification, they see that Allah Ta'ala has given them the ability to mention Him, has given them the ability to pray. So you see that even your acts of devotion are a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are from Him, given to you, back to Him. So that's why they call it unification. Not that we are unified with God, because God is not a thing for us to be attached to. That's where sometimes the translation can become problematic. But unification is the right word for what we're describing. I mean, al-jama, that's the right word to describe what he's explaining. There is no escape for the servant of God from both unification and separation. For he who does not have separation cannot achieve perfect servitude, and he who does not have unification has no knowledge of God. So we're always going to be between the two. You can't just be in jama. You have to pray, you have to fast, you have to you're a spouse, you're a father, so on and so. You have to do those things. But at the same time, you need to know that it's not really you. That Allah Ta'ala is the one that's in control. God's words in the Quran, Thee only we serve. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ, thee only we serve or worship, it points to separation. While Allah Ta'ala's words, to thee alone we have recourse, إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, that's the jama', that's the point of unification. So in the Fatiha we say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ, so we are acknowledging that we obey, we pray, we do devotional work. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, and we seek assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where the jama' comes from, because that can only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, even our prayer and our devotional work comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He gives us the ability to do it. When the servant of God addresses him, Allah Ta'ala, in his intimate conversation with him as a beggar, a supplicant, a lauder, a giver of thanks, a renouncer of evil deeds, or a humble beseecher, he places himself in the position of separation. And when he listens to his inner self, to what his Lord tells him, and hears in his heart what God imparts to him by calling upon him, admonishing him, instructing him, or intimating something to his heart, and willing him to follow, he finds himself under the sign of unification. So when you ask Allah, when you're in a state of dua and you're asking Allah for things, at that moment you're in a state of separation, because you are acknowledging, I need this, I need that. But then when you are just moving along your life and then you listen to the inspiration that comes to you, that's when you are in the state of unification. I heard Abu Ali ad-Daqqaq, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, say, a singer recited the following verses before Master Abu Sahl as-Su'luki, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him. I have made my vision of you my greatest pleasure. Abu al-Qasim al-Nasrabadi, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, was there at that time. Master Abu Sahl said, made, meaning I have made my vision. Made should be read in the second person. Al-Nasrabadi said, no, it should be read in the first person. Master Abu Sahl then asked, isn't the essence of unification more complete? And then Al-Nasrabadi fell silent. I heard that Sheikh Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami interpreted the story in the same way as Abu Sahl. The meaning of this is as follows. When someone says made in the first person, it means that the speaker speaks about the state of his own self, as if the servant of God implies that this action comes from him. As for the one who says that made should be in the second person, he absolves himself from any deliberate action and says to his Lord, it is you who have distinguished me with this quality, and not I by means of my own deliberate action. The first interpretation contains the danger of an egoistic claim, whereas the second implies the denial of one's free power to act and the assertion of God's beneficence and generosity. There is a great difference between the one who says, I worship you through my own free effort, and the one who says, I witness you through your beneficence and kindness. Okay, and then to make things more confusing, we have another further degree called Jama' al-Jama', the unification of unification, and that's the next section. The unification of unification is higher than this. So the first one that we talked about is separation and unification, and we're always between these two modes. When we are sober in our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ask Allah ta'ala for certain things, that's when we are in a state of separation. And then when we are focused on our ibadah and we just kind of glide in it and we are not aware that we are doing it, then we are in the state of unification. So we're always between these two. But then there's something higher than that where you get out of that duality altogether. So it's called Jama' al-Jama', unification of unification. The unification of unification is higher than this. People differ on this issue according to the differences in their spiritual states and in the ranks of spiritual attainment. When someone reasserts both himself and the created world, yet sees everything in this world as being dependent on God, this is unification. When, on the other hand, through the appearance and under the complete domination of the power of the divine reality, one is rendered incapable of contemplating the created world, barred from one's own self, and taken in one's entirety from sensing anything else, this is unification of unification. So the person that sees that everything is coming from the created act of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the state in unification, but is still aware that they are thinking that. The person that's beyond that, that's not even aware that that is Jama' al-Jama'. It is to be completely gone in the witnessing of that one reality, that everything comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus, separation is seeking something other than God subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unification is seeing everything through the eyes of God. And unification of unification is total self-dissolution in God and the loss of the perception of anything other than God as a result of the onslaught of the irresistible powers of the divine reality. So you enter into worship, you're praying at night or you're doing dhikr, and then you lose track of time and space, and you even lose track of what you're saying, but you are witnessing that the whole created world is just a created act by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sustained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not even aware of that. That's what al-Jama is. After this comes the lofty state that the Sufi calls second separation, farq al-thani. In this state, the servant of God returns to sobriety whenever he must perform any of his religious duties so that he can fulfill his religious obligations in the proper times. This is a return to God, the Most High, through God, not to the servant through the servant. So there is no, what we don't want is we don't want in our spiritual journey to get lost. So even though he's speaking about very lofty spiritual things, we don't want to get stuck there, because that's not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was sober, as we talked about in the last class. He did the things he needed to do. He led the army. He was a father. He was a husband. He had companions. He adjudicated court cases between people. He did all of the things that he has to do. He slaughtered the animals. He ate. He slept. He bled, so on and so forth. But it is the second return, because you're coming with that knowledge and that spiritual experience inside you. So this is why this discipline of tasawwuf requires these type of writings and somebody to guide you so you don't get stuck. Because there are people that can get stuck in that, and then they can't do anything. In this state, the servant sees himself being driven by God's will. He sees God's power as the ultimate source of his essence and his self. He sees God's knowledge and will as the true performer of his actions and the originator of his spiritual states. By the phrase unification and separation, some Sufis imply that creatures are subject to the dispositions of the divine reality. He has united everything under his power and disposal, since he is the originator of their essences and the determinator of their attributes. He has then divided them into several classes. Some of them are destined to be amongst the blessed. Others are destined to be far removed from him and to be among the wretched. Some of them he will guide aright. Others he will lead astray and make blind. Some of them he will veil from himself. Others he will draw near. Some of them he will make his intimates by allowing them to join him. Others he will make despair of his mercy. Some of them he will grant his assistance. Others he will frustrate in their aspirations to realize his true essence. Some of them he will keep sober, and others he will obliterate. Some of them he will draw nigh. Others he will make absent from themselves. Some of them he brings into his presence, make them drink, and intoxicates them. Others he renders miserable and rejects, then banishes and expels. One cannot count all the varieties of his actions, Allah's actions, nor can they be exhausted by any explanation and enumeration. They, the Sufis, recite the following verse from Junayd radiallahu anhu about the meaning of unification and separation. And Junayd says, quote, I have attained a true realization of you in my innermost heart, and I conversed with you with my own tongue. We were united in one sense and separated in the other. At one moment, my awe of you makes me absent from seeing you directly. Yet, in the next moment, my ecstasy makes you close to my very core. They, the Sufis, also recite the following. When he appears to me, nothing seems greater to me than he. Then I return to the original state as if I never left it. I become united and dispersed from myself through him. For two numbers can join to become a singular one. Okay, so what he's saying about the separation and unification, and Jam' al-Jam, unification of unification, is that when you experience that everything is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even your own actions, then you also see that what's happening in the world around you is also coming through Allah Ta'ala's actions. You see it, you experience it. It's not like you're just saying it. You see that. You see, oh, this person, Allah created him to be a liar. Oh, this person, Allah Ta'ala created him to be a kind person. Oh, this person, Allah created this person to be a murderer. You see that all of this is an extension of the created act in all of its variety. That everything in the world around us, in the natural environment, in the world of events, in the world of people, all of the worlds that we experience, you start to see and you experience with your spiritual heart that Allah Ta'ala is controlling all of these things. That's one of the results of deep devotional work. But then you come back and you do your own work having that experience. Right? Like when the hadith says, my servant, the hadith Qudsi, my servant draws near to me until I become the eye with which they see. Right? The ear with which they hear, the tongue with which they speak. That's what he's talking about, is that you become guided in your actions and in your perspectives from the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is controlling all of that. And when you're like that, by the way, you become unstoppable. You become an unstoppable force because nothing will be able to shake your faith because you see it. You just see that. Of course, there's going to be misery and destruction because Allah Ta'ala will manifest with those traits. And of course, there'll be mercy and hope because Allah manifests with it. Nothing will faze you from that. Okay. Annihilation and subsistence. Al-fana' wal-baqa. These are more common terms that you find discussed in tasawwuf. Al-jama' and al-farq, they're rare, but the fana' and baqa are more common. I know this is heavy stuff, but thank God we have people like this that wrote about it, so we kind of know what's going on. And we have something to think about. Sometimes you just have to, oh wow, my biggest task was just to pray Fajr this morning. I was thinking about separation and unity, but we want to push ourselves higher, inshallah. Okay, annihilation, al-fana'. Again, this is a correct translation, but I mean, we need to understand what that means because annihilation sounds like something bad when you just say it on its own. And by annihilation, the Sufis refer to the disappearance of blameworthy qualities, whereas by subsistence, baqa, they refer to the persistence of praiseworthy qualities. So in the spiritual path, you have to have what they call takhalli and tahalli. Takhalli is to take away your negative traits. At-takhliya is to, I have a problem with anger, I gotta stop that. Oh, I eat too much, I gotta stop that. Oh, I'm envious, those are the negative traits. And then at-tahliya is to adopt the opposite of them, the positive traits. So he's saying one interpretation is that fana, annihilation, is to annihilate yourself from the negative traits. And baqa is to keep yourself subsistent with the positive traits. That's what he's saying. The servant of God cannot but have one of these two types of qualities, for it is well known that if he does not have one type, he will inevitably have the other. So if you don't have the positive trait, that means you're going to have its negative opposite. You can't be like in the middle. It's this or that. Either you have envy or you don't have envy. Either you have arrogance or you don't have arrogance. It's not like a middle path in the middle that you can be. When his blameworthy qualities are annihilated, he will possess praiseworthy ones. So let's say somebody's arrogant. Well, what's the solution? Is to not be arrogant, which means to be humble. So you've taken the negative and you've gone to the positive. So it has to be this or that. So when you do that and you possess the praiseworthy trait. Likewise, when he is dominated by blameworthy characteristics, he will be deprived of praiseworthy ones. Know that the servant of God is characterized by deeds, morals, and spiritual states. Deeds are what he undertakes with his own free will. So we've come here on our own free will and we're listening and we're talking together. So this is a deed. Allah has given us the free will to do this. Morals are his inherent predispositions. How somebody naturally is. Some people are naturally stingy. Some people are naturally kind. Some people are naturally this. Some people are naturally that. But morals are his inherent predispositions, which, however, can be changed through continual exercises. Spiritual states come to the servant from the outset. However, their subsequent purity is determined by the cleanness of his actions. In this respect, they are similar to morals. So, well, let me pause before about spiritual states. Let's talk about morals. So the moral is how your constitutional state, let's say. Even though you were born a certain way, let's say somebody is naturally stingy. You can teach yourself not to be stingy by being generous. You just do it long enough, then you become a generous person. Even if it's a little uncomfortable, if you keep doing it, you will change. So for us, we don't say, oh, that's just how I am. That's a difference. In the dominant culture, we are told that it's okay. People are different. So that means if I have a negative trait, you have to accept that I'm a sociopath. No, I don't accept that. And you can work on fixing that. Inshallah, you'll fix it. So for us, we can change the constitutional states that we have. And indeed, we must. We call that a jihadul akbar, right? This is the greater jihad. So deeds are the things that we do because we have free will. And then the morals, as he's translating it, are the things that, we kind of our default. And now he says spiritual states come to the servant from the outset. However, their subsequent purity is determined only by the cleanness of their actions. In this respect, they are similar to morals. So everyone is born on the natural state, al-fitra, the primordial state. So every child that's born is pure. That's our belief. So when we were talking about Gaza, for example, when all of this happened almost, subhanAllah, 2 years ago, one of the things we were commenting on is the belief that we have of the sanctity of all life, and that there is no moral justification ever for the killing of a person. There can be a legal argument for the killing of a person, but you can't say morally, you can't make a moral argument. The Prophet ﷺ said each child is born in the primordial state, and then their parents will influence them in this religious tradition or that religious tradition. But the natural state, as he's saying, is we are pure. And then as you grow up and you do things, that purity lessens. In this respect, the spiritual states are like the morals. God allows the person whose heart preoccupies itself with morals through his own concerted effort, and banishes from it any reprehensible qualities to improve his morals. Likewise, God will allow the person who strives to purify his deeds of his own accord to purify and protect his spiritual states. So your morals, the way you are naturally, and your spiritual states, if you work on them, Allah will bless you and you will be blessed, and you will move from the negative to the positive. That's what he's saying. When somebody abandons the evil deeds denounced by the divine law, it is said that he has annihilated from his passions. And so let's say I go somewhere and somebody offers me an alcoholic drink, okay, and I say, I can't. I'm Muslim. I don't drink, right? So you've extinguished that passion. You've conquered it, right? So you've done something good, he's saying. And when he has annihilated from his passions, he subsists in the service of God through his determination and sincerity. When someone renounces this world, it is said that he has annihilated from his desire of it. And when he is annihilated from his desire of it, he subsists in the sincerity of his repentance. When someone has refined his morals by cleansing his heart of envy, malice, avarice, greed, anger, pride, as well as any other impurities that adhere to the soul, it is said he has been annihilated from the base character traits. And when one is annihilated from the bad morals, one subsists in chivalry and truthfulness. So in the process, I think this cup is broken. Can you take it's all leaking all over the table. Yeah, maybe it's like cracked. It's okay. I don't need water. I'm just saying it's just so when one when one attacks the negative traits that we have, okay, all of these traits somehow are linked to love of this world. So all of them, he even gave a little list of some of these negative, envy and greed. And if you think about it, they're all linked somehow to attachment of this world. Right? That was the Buddha's great teaching, that there is suffering in the world, and suffering comes from attachment. Right? It's the same thing for us. Our attachment to things is what creates the frustration and the negative traits that we have. So when you work on yourself and you negate the negative traits, what you're doing at the same time is you are negating attachment to this world. And you're just satisfied. And that's why I said you become like an unstoppable force. Because a person who is not attached to this world and who understands that this world is just a moment and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control, no one can stop that person. Because there's nothing you can take away from them. There's nothing you can do to stop them. There's nothing you can do can convince them. Like when they told the Prophet ﷺ, we'll make you the richest person amongst us, we'll make you the king amongst us. And they were thinking materially. So he said, if you put the moon in my right hand and the sun in my left hand, I'm not going to stop. There's nothing in this world that you can give me that will make me. So this is not about this world. So that's related to this world. That's why he's talking like that. When one observes the working of divine powers in the vicissitudes of divine decrees, it is said that one has been annihilated from seeking events as emanating from creatures. And when one is annihilated from perceiving events as products of secondary causes, one subsists in the attributes of the real. So in the process of cleansing yourself, you see that everything, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, everything goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not seeing that this administration did this act, or this person you don't see that. You see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the actor. And everyone is just how Allah ta'ala sought to manifest in this world. So if you see an accident, like, oh, it's this person's fault, they cut this person, they ran the light, that's sort of, you're stuck in this world. The person he's talking about, he says, subhanallah, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It doesn't negate the causality, the links that we see in front of us, but you know that this is all linked back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the power of the true reality takes possession of someone, he no longer notices the essence, effects, traces, and vestiges of anything other than God. They say of such a person, he has been annihilated from God's creatures and now subsists in God. So this person is not afraid of anyone, doesn't see anyone, doesn't care about anyone. All they see is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the actor, is the only actor. He is the creator. Everything else is just contingent. The servant of God is annihilated from his blameworthy deeds and base states when he does not perform them. And he is annihilated from his own self and from all creatures when he ceases to perceive both them and himself. When he is annihilated from deeds, morals, and spiritual states, all this no longer exists for him. One can say that someone has been annihilated from himself and from all creatures, yet in reality his self and his creatures continue to exist. However, he has no knowledge, perception, or sign of them. His self exists and the creatures continue to exist objectively. However, he is oblivious of them and is capable of perceiving neither his self nor the creatures. So again, such a person that he's describing is just not aware of the details of life around them, because they are focused, all they can see is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're still there, of course. That's why the word annihilation and subsistence, if you don't understand our belief system, you can grossly mistranslate them, as they have been by other Orientalists. But such a person is just not aware of those. If somebody's struggling with arrogance, for example, if you think about it, it means that the arrogant person is really focused on what other people are doing and saying and thinking. You're focused on others, not yourself. But the person who only sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nobody else for you to care about. It's just you. So you don't have a problem. That person doesn't have a problem with arrogance, because they're not even paying attention. They're not aware. They're just doing what they need to do. So they're not thinking, oh, should I pray now or not pray now? Is somebody going to see me? Or should I take my tasbih out and do my dhikr? What if they don't have those kind of conversations because all they see is Allah, Allah, Allah in front of them all the time. So they're not focused on anything else. Imagine, for example, that a man enters into the presence of a mighty ruler or a highly revered person and becomes so self-effaced in his reverence that he forgets about both himself and other people in the assembly, including the revered individual himself. You know, when people are like starstruck and they meet like a famous person and you're just so overwhelmed, and sometimes they don't know how to speak or they don't know what to say, and they might even be so overwhelmed at them being so overwhelmed that they even forget about the person that's in front of them. That's what he's saying. You're just completely starstruck. When he would emerge from the assembly and be asked about the people there and the behavior of the revered individual and about his own behavior, he would not be able to say anything about that. He was just so overwhelmed. You know, sometimes people pass out. Have you ever seen those videos like Michael Jackson concerts, like those girls that like pass out? I mean, I could never understand that. I mean, it's just Michael Jackson, so what's the big deal? But I mean, they're just so, oh my God, it's Michael Jackson. They would like faint, or like the Beatles or something. I mean, I can't understand that. I wouldn't. Maybe if we saw Michael Jackson now, we would pass out because he's supposed to be dead. That's different. But at the time, I mean, yeah, he was talented, but to the point of passing out. Anyway, he's talking about something like that. So imagine, you know, you're a big fan of, you know, I don't know, let's say Taylor Swift, and then she comes out. You've been waiting the whole year to get tickets to go to the concert. You go to the concert and she runs by you and she taps you on the shoulder and you pass out. That's what he's talking about. You're just so overwhelmed that when you wake up, you miss the whole concert. You don't even remember what happened. That's what he's talking about. So he's saying, imagine that. He didn't say Taylor Swift, but I'm giving you a context that you can understand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and when they saw Joseph, they so admired him that they cut their hands. So when Yusuf alayhi salam, because he was so handsome, right, the women were whispering in the city that the wife of the Aziz is trying to seduce Yusuf and Yusuf is rejecting. So she wanted to show them, you know, why there's this issue. So she invited them all, she put an apple in front of them, put a knife, and then she told Yusuf alayhi salam to come out to serve them. And they were so overtaken by his beauty that instead of cutting the apple, they cut their fingers. Right? This is in Surah Yusuf. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us the same thing. Not Taylor Swift, but he's telling us it really happened, right? So when they met Joseph alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam, they took no notice at all of the pain from cutting their hands, although they were more feeble than men. That's obviously a chauvinistic comment, so I'm not going to touch that. They said, this is no mortal. Hasha lillah. They said, ma hadha basharin hadha illa malikun kareem. They said, this can't be a person. It's got to be an angel. They said, this is no mortal, while he in fact was a mortal. And they said, he is none other than a noble angel, while he in fact was not an angel. And this is the state of one group of creatures meeting another group. You can only imagine the man or woman to whom the sight of God subhanahu wa ta'ala was disclosed. If he were to lose the sense of himself and his fellow human beings, would there be any surprise in that? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests to you and opens to you these spiritual understandings, it's even more intense than these type of stories that we're talking about. If you can see a beautiful person and pass out, or if you can see a famous person and pass out, imagine when the King of Kings, when the creator of the universe opens that spiritual meaning to you, you're going to be touched in a way that's this is all small stuff. So you will lose your connectivity to the things of this world. But you will be in this world and do the things of this world, but by being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why it's called al-baqa, that you remain like that, outwardly sober, but inwardly connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a man is annihilated from his ignorance, he subsists in his knowledge And when he is annihilated from his passions, he subsists in his repentance. When he is annihilated from his desire of this world, he persists in its renunciation. When he is annihilated from his passionate drive, he subsists in his longing for God. This is true of all human characteristics. So such a person, there's no breaking this person. They're constantly in a state of repentance because they've done away with all of their negative traits. They're constantly in a state of renunciation of this world because they've already experienced the real. So they don't care about this world. So you can't go to this person and bribe them. You can't go to this person and trick them. You can't go to this person and, make them stop. No matter what you do to this person, they win. If you leave them, they are free, they win. If you incarcerate them, they're constantly in a state of worship, they win. If you kill them, they've been given the greatest victory, they're a martyr. You can do nothing to such a person, zero. Anything that you do to this person will only add, because they have annihilated themselves from these traits. Imagine now a community filled of people like this. And this is one of the benefits of tasawwuf, is that when we talk about it like this, hopefully one or two of us will be like this. And then you'll take the rest of us with you. But if we didn't talk about this at all, then we have zero chance. But when we talk about this constantly with the community, one person, a young person, will hear something like, I want to be like that. And then that will motivate them. And this is one of the benefits of how the deen is taught. Okay. This is true of all human characteristics. After the servant of God is annihilated from his characteristics, as we have just described, he advances from this stage to the next, at which he loses sight of his annihilation. This is described by the poet who said, some people wander across the land by the desert, while others wander in the arena of his love. Annihilate yourself thrice, then subsist close to the Lord. Annihilate yourself thrice, this is a Muslim thing, right? Because how many divorces does a man have? 3. So he's saying, divorce this world 3 times, meaning there's no going back after that. So he said something important, that the person is not aware of their own annihilation. That's what he said previously in Jama al-Jama, that they're not even aware that they have experienced this. So if somebody is aware that they have been in the state of annihilation, that's not a kamal, that's not the prophetic model. The prophetic model is that you're not even aware of that. And you come back and you just live your normal life outwardly. But inwardly, you are in that state all the time. So the things we're talking about, these people that we're talking about, these people had a completely normal outward life. They did everything that we have to do. They had to wake up, they had to eat, they had to provide for their families, they had to deal with their neighbors, they had to deal with all sorts of nonsense, the ups and downs of politics and empire and economy. Sometimes they had money, sometimes they didn't have money. I don't want you to think that these people had a perfect life. They all lived the same life we do. But all the things we're talking about is what's happening on the inside. The first annihilation is from oneself and one's attributes through subsistence in the attributes of God. Then comes the annihilation from the attributes of God in the contemplation of God. Then one is annihilated from the vision of one's own annihilation by being subsumed in the existence of God himself. This is the conclusion of all of this, the progression of how you go. I want to just pause and see if there are any questions, because if I do the next section, it'll probably take us straight till Maghrib, which is fine. Are you reading from your phone? Okay. The PDF? Okay. No, I just wanted to know if is it like Netflix or like YouTube, or it's I want to know, am I that off the mark? I assumed good. No, I know. I didn't know. Because the book is so heavy, when I went to Kenya, I did it from my iPad. Yeah, I used the PDF too because I couldn't carry it. No, it's fine. To each his own. I was just asking. I mean, I can keep going. I just wanted to, because
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Since this book is always referring to the Sufis, right? Sufis say this thing, Sufis refer this thing. For this Fana and Baka, you refer these two words, Fana and Baka, that both they were both mentioned as the state of purification. Both are is purification, as like Sufis say. Fana means let go all the desires. As it's mentioned there that fana means let go all the desires, worldly desires. What baka means in comparison to fana?
So fana, he's saying, is to leave the bad traits. And baqa is to adopt the positive traits and keep the positive traits. No, they're two, but they're twins. Yeah. Yeah. And the reason this chapter that we're reading, which is quite lengthy, the reason it's so important is that, as we said many weeks ago, actually this is maybe only 20 more pages, but you cannot understand a subject unless you understand the vocabulary used by that subject. So that's what this chapter is for. This chapter is to tell us these are what these terms mean. Because one of the things that the Islamic sciences did is that all Islamic sciences, not just tasawwuf, they adopted special words to try to explain these complicated things. So we have terms in logic, we have terms in theology, we have terms in law, and we have terms in tasawwuf. These are very good terms, they're very accurate, but you have to understand what they mean. So that's what this chapter is about, just explaining to you the vocabulary.
Generally, what does it mean? What is the fana and baka?
Leave your bad traits and adopt the good trait. Be happy, don't be bad. Don't be happy, don't be sad. Be good, don't be bad. That's basically what he's saying. That's what he said.
On chat as yet.
Shall we do a little bit more? Okay. No, go ahead. Please.
So that you can answer.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Sorry, echo. I'll try to manage it.
That's like Enes's microphone. I think that's why it echoes.
All right. So I have a question with regard to the hadith that's often quoted in the context of tasawwuf, which is my servant ceaseth not to draw nigh unto me until through supererogatory prayers and rites until I become the seeing,
Yeah.
which, right? So is there a causal relationship between the servant's actions and God allowing that what comes after? Is there a causation there?
Yes, of course, in the sense that when you worship, when you do the things that you're supposed to do, the obligatory acts, and then you do the supererogatory, the extra acts, it's all acts of devotion. They're not empty acts. So those acts are going to have this impact. So you do a little of these acts and then you receive a lot more in return from the point of view of the spiritual opening. Yes, so it is a causal relationship. But it's not the only causal relationship, because sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up for somebody who does nothing. Has no belief, but Allah just calls them and there's whoa, they just wake up. So I mean, I guess that would be easier. but yes, but I don't want you to think too much about the causal relationship, because we don't worship God for that. We don't worship God for a result. We worship God because He is deserving of worship, because He is the Creator.
Okay. All right. Barakallahu feek. And the second question is a question related to terminology. So I understand from today's discussion the meaning, what it comes to, the meaning of jama', of gathering, unification. Is that comparable to the word, the word in Arabic for theologian? If I'm not mistaken, it's mutawahid. Someone who is a theologian is referred to as, is that correct?
Yeah, well, theology is sometimes called ilm al-tawheed. Mutawahid is somebody who is a monotheist.
So is a mutawahid comparable to one who is kind of engaging in that process of unification?
Technically, it's a different term,
I
but
see.
linguistically, yeah, you could say that.
I see.
You could say that this person is mutawahid and that they see everything as singular. Yeah. But technically, when we say in Islam, inside the discussion of Islam, if we say the word mutawahid, we mean that this person is a monotheist
I see. I see.
because it's been given a technical meaning.
All right. Barakallahu feek. Thank you.
Should I do the next section? Okay. Absence and presence, ghaiba and hudur. Absence is when the heart is absent from knowing the circumstances of creatures due to the complete absorption of the senses by what has appeared to it from God. So you're just absent because Allah Ta'ala has manifested on you with something, so you're absent to everything else. One may also become absent from oneself and others through remembering God's promise of reward and thinking of God's punishment. It is said that Rabia ibn Kuthaym used to visit Ibn Mas'ud, may God be pleased with him. As he was passing by a blacksmith's shop, he saw a red-hot iron in the oven and fainted, and he did not come to until the next morning. When he woke up, he was asked about what happened, and he answered, I remember how the people of the hellfire will sojourn in the fire, how they will travel into the fire. This was an absence that went beyond its limits and turned into a swoon. It is recounted of Ali ibn al-Hussein, alayhi salam, grandson of the Prophet, great grandson, that he was performing a ritual prayer when suddenly his house caught fire. However, he did not interrupt his prayer. When asked about that, he said, the greatest fire made me oblivious of that fire, meaning the fire of the hellfire. Occasionally, a man can be rendered absent from his self-perception by something that God subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to him. So the idea is that sometimes the spiritual experience can be so great that you're not paying attention to the other things that are around you. Like when somebody's in love, and you're in love with somebody and you're getting to know that person for the beginning, you're absent of time, you might even be absent of hunger or being tired, you're just, you have this adrenaline, kind of what he's talking about, but as it relates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who experience absence differ from one another according to their spiritual states. It is well known that the spiritual state of Abu Hafs al-Nisaburi al-Haddad began when he gave up his profession. He was a blacksmith. He was in his shop when he heard someone reciting a verse from the Quran. At that moment, he had an experience that made him oblivious of his senses. He put his hand into the fire and took out a piece of the red-hot iron. His apprentice saw this and cried, "What is this, master?" When Abu Hafs realized what he had just happened, he gave up his trade and left the profession. Right? So he was so taken by hearing the verse of the Quran that he was like listening, like the women and the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and he put his hand in the fire. He burned himself. Once Al-Junayd was sitting together with his wife. Al-Shibli entered the room. The wife hurried to cover herself, but Al-Junayd said to her, "Sit still, for Al-Shibli is unaware of you." Al-Junayd conversed with Al-Shibli for a while until the latter broke into tears. When he began to cry, Junayd said to his wife, "Cover yourself now, for Al-Shibli has come too." I heard Abu Nasr, the Mu'adhin of Nisapur, who was a pious man, say, I was reading the Quran at the session of Master Abu Ali al-Daqqaq in Nisapur when he was residing there. He used to talk a lot about the Hajj, and his words left a deep imprint in my heart. When I went on Hajj that year, I abandoned my store and my trade. Master Abu Ali al-Daqqaq, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, also went on Hajj the same year. When he was living in Nisabur, I used to serve him and to attend study sessions at his house. As I was on my way to Mecca, I saw him in the desert. After he had performed his ablution, he forgot the bottle he used to carry with him. I picked it up and carried it with me. When he resumed his journey, I gave it to him and he said, "May God reward you for bringing it." He looked at me for a while as if he had not seen me before and then said, "I have seen you once. Who are you?" I answered, "May God be my helper. I was your companion for many years. I left my home and my possessions because of you and journeyed in the barren desert together with you. And now you tell that you and now you tell that you have seen me once. So he was just completely, I mean, even though he was a student, he was like, who are you? Because the whole time he was somewhere else. As for presence, it is when someone is present with God. For when he is absent from creatures, he enters into the presence of God in the sense that he is present with him, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is due to the fact that the recollection of God takes full possession of his heart, and he finds his heart to be present with God Most High. Someone's presence with God corresponds to the levels of his absence from creatures. So we have two doors. One door of our heart is to the dunya, and one door of our heart is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you close the door to the dunya, the door to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens more, and the opposite. So the best way to think about this is Ramadan. You know, in Ramadan, you experience all of these great spiritual meanings because you've closed that door, which is the act of fasting, throughout the day, or the majority of the day. The majority of the 24 hours a day, we're in a state of fasting, most of us. So that lessens our attachment to the dunya. So our attachment to the celestial realm increases, which is why we experience all of these beautiful things in the month of Ramadan, and why we never miss a prayer in Ramadan, we never miss an iftar in Ramadan, we never miss Taraweeh in Ramadan, but then we struggle to wake up for Salatul Eid the next day. At least I do. But what just happened? Just a few hours ago, we were just, because the door is now opened. So this is an important kind of reciprocal relationship. Someone's presence with God, just to repeat, corresponds to the level of his absence from his creature. When he is completely absent from creatures, when he is completely absent from creatures, his presence is complete. When they say that someone is present, this means that his heart is present with God, without being neglectful or forgetful of him, and constantly remembering him. In his presence, God subhanahu wa ta'ala will unveil in him things that he has prepared for him and him only. So this is what our version or our understanding of mindfulness. To be mindful is to be mindful of the presence of God all the time. And the more you are mindful of Allah's presence, the less you are mindful about the presence of everybody else. I think it was one of the great Salaf, the saint, I can't remember who it was. He said, people think that I have been speaking to them for 20 years, but I've only been speaking to God. So it's an act of worship, even teaching or preaching or whatever the case may be. It's just for them, it's an act of where all they see is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes Sufis describe the servant's return to self-awareness and to awareness of other creatures as his presence, meaning that he has returned from his absence from creatures to his presence with creatures after he was present with God. So they kind of reverse the usage of the terms. Their states in absence may vary. The absence of some does not last, whereas the absence of others may last for a while. It is said that Dhunnun al-Misri sent out one of his companions to Abu Yazid al-Bastami so that the companion would give him a description of Abu Yazid. When the companion reached the city of Bistam, he asked about the house of Abu Yazid. When he entered the house, Abu Yazid asked him what he wanted. He answered, I am looking for Abu Yazid al-Bastami. Abu Yazid answered, who is Abu Yazid? Where is Abu Yazid? I myself am in search of Abu Yazid. This is Abu Yazid himself speaking. He's like, I'm looking for this guy. Where is this guy? The companion left his house saying, this is a madman. He returned to the Nun al-Misri and told him about what he had seen. On hearing this, the Nun began to cry, and he said, my brother Abu Yazid has joined those who travel to God. Now, this is where we're going to stop. Now, when we read stories like this is not the example. Okay, he's just recounting the experiences that people have. Our example is the Prophet ﷺ. So we don't want to be mad or crazy or forget our name or forget that we're wearing clothes or none of that stuff. All these stories that you find in these type of books are to show you, to express to you how people can experience these meanings. That somebody can be so far in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they are not even aware of their own selves. But such a person also might not be able to function in society. The Prophet ﷺ, he said to the companions, if you remained in the mosque, and if you worshipped and you prayed, etc., then you would see the angels around you and you would shake hands with the angels. You know this hadith, it's a famous hadith. Many people think, oh wow, mashallah, I want that. But that's the Prophet ﷺ was saying that as a warning. Imagine if you walked into the mosque and you just saw the mosque filled with angels. You'd be crazy. You would go crazy. You would not be able to live a normal life. So that's why لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That's why in the Messenger of Allah is a perfect example. He is the example for us. So why do we have these people? We have these people to show us less than the Prophet ﷺ, people like us, what can happen when you experience certain things. But don't go out and try to do this. This is a natural thing. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Okay, quickly, because I think Maghrib is... How about what? What an anger? Well, as I said, that all of the negative traits that we have are somehow related to love of this world. Because if we are focused only on this world, then we will manifest the attachment to this world and the diseases that come from that attachment. Arrogance, stinginess, anger, so on and so forth, ostentation, everything. All of those are extensions of just focusing on this world. If you realize that this world is just a passing, it's like a rest stop, and then the world to come is, that's real life, then you will lessen your attachment to this world, and then you will start to have the positive character traits. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the Prophet ﷺ is the best example, He doesn't say he's the best example for everyone. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ is a perfect example for the person who remembers God often, who wants Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows that they will go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you just want this world, then the Prophet ﷺ is not your example. Because he gave and he gave and he was generous, and that's, you can't take him to manage your portfolio, example, because he gave everything away. He built an empire, but he gave it all away. So he's not the example if that's all you want. You got to go to people like Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio and others to figure out how you're going to manage your portfolio. Those are the examples. So when we say that the Prophet ﷺ is the best example, it's because we are remembering Allah Ta'ala often, and we know inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And then as for anger, anger is, as I said at the khutbah today, the worst trait, because it kind of messes everything else up. Anything else? No? Okay. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.